Christian for the analysis. Maybe you cannot find solution with.
Thank you, but we understand Canada, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't. No.
So, good afternoon, everybody. As I said earlier, my name is Idan Porat. I'm from Israel Haifa Technion, and we will focus on this session around the presentation that the LIT and I made for the start of our working group for our session. I would like to connect in the beginning to the thing that Athena, the keynote speaker, talked about in the beginning of this day. She described the mass housing of Thessaloniki, as I pronounce it, Thessaloniki. And
Now you know.
now I know. And she mentioned a lot of the things that we're going to talk about, and she mentioned it with words. She said that the buildings in Thessaloniki were high, and they were close to each other or separated, and she said that those issues were very important, whether this was a mass housing for the middle class or for social mass housing. And our work is started from this point, when we understand that there are different patterns, and there are different structures of mass housing, and those different patterns, the different structures mean different things, mean different policy, mean different quality of life for the people that live in those neighborhoods or in those social housing patterns. And what we wanted to do is try to move a little bit from the qualitative analysis of the housing to a little bit more mix of quality and quantity measurements of those mass housing. And for that, we started to use the platform of the GIS. And from what I've heard, some of you are a little bit familiar with GIS, but not everybody. So we started with a little, very small presentation of what GIS means and what we can do with it. It will be very short, but we want to focus on the options of GIS in the field or in the area of analyzing the typologies of mass housing, and there are in this research a lot of open questions. And I think that one of the goals of this workshop is to try to start to address those questions. So I will speak, I will present, but I will be very happy if you stop me from time to time, ask questions, propose some kind of progress or some kind of thing that you might want to do during this workshop, because I think it will be a very good starting point if we all start to, raise our feelings or raise our questions or raise our interests regarding those issues. And in the following sessions, in the small groups or in a big group, we will try to develop those thoughts, those issues that we'll start to raise now into more semantic and more methodological aspects. So this was a very short beginning, and we'll start this. Yes. Share my screen now. So, very few words about GIS. GIS, for the first, what we can say about it is an information system. We live for a moment the geographical world in the outside, and we talk about information system. In information system, we have, like in Excel, a line for each case, for each, number of a case study or a case, and for this case we have different parameters that describe it. Like if it's a person, then we can say if it's a male or a female, what the weight, what the height, what the education. Okay, so we have a parameter for this person or for this company, something like that. But in geographic information system, we actually add the position, the location of the information that we analyze. And when we do this, when we take the information system and add the geographical position of each and every line in the database, we can create a spatial database that is located in space, in the environment. Okay. How it was began long time ago. In London, there was a doctor called John Snow. It's not the one from the Game of Thrones, the original John Snow. and he was a doctor, and he started to meet people with the malaria disease. The people with the malaria disease were concentrated in a neighborhood. And he understood that something in the neighborhood, something probably in the water, creates this disease, but he couldn't find the source. So what he did, it was many years ago, he started to put the cases on a map, the cases of the people that he met with this disease. And when he starts to connect the location of the people that were sick, he understood that there is a centroid, something in the center of the neighborhood where all the diseases people were around. And he found that in the center there was a whale, that the people from the neighborhood took their drinking water. And what he did, he thought that maybe if they will stop drinking from this whale, from this place, they will maybe the pandemic will stop. And this was the first case in the history that we know that a GIS analysis of a pandemic was made. And this is Johnson. Few decades later, what we can do with the GIS is actually we can do the geodatabase like I told you before, and we can also we will give you the presentation free for you, so you can focus on thinking. We can also geoprocess the data by models. This is something that we'll show you in a few minutes. And we can also geo-visualization the data, and that's also something that we can do together. When we look at the GIS, and the all three, the models, the geodatabase, and the maps, we can start separate them to several layers, but I want to focus on the differences between the layers. In the upper layer, you can see the word customers, yeah, people that buy things, and they are presented by dots. They have a presentation in the geodatabase as dots. The second layer is streets. The streets are represented in the database by lines. Okay, so we can have a database of dots. We can have a database of lines. The third one is a database of parcels, lots, and here we can analyze polygons. Okay, so we have dots, lines, polygons. Those three elements of GIS, we call them vectors, because they present some kind of shape, like a line, a polygon, or a polygon. The other two, elevation and land uses, they are different databases, and we call them rasters. Oh, thank you. What is a raster? A raster is like a pixels on a map. Here they represent the elevation, and here they represent the land. If we combine all the layers, those layers with other layers, we can demonstrate, or we can model the physical world. So this is what we want to create when we deal with GIS. For some examples, like streets and parcels in a database, the GIS database, or parcels with information, the shape or the size of the parcels here in this demonstration. Here we can do a two-dimensional model of buffers from a single line or road. We can analyze the distance, or what happens in a distance of 2 miles, 4 miles, 6 miles, 8 miles from this specific polyline or line. model, this demonstration. We can do a 3D models of cities, of landscape. We can also analyze physical aspects of wind or noise and different aspects of that can influence the built environment. We can also analyze view shade. For instance, what can be seen from this spot, what can be seen from this building here, and what will happen to the people that see this beautiful square here if we will build a new building here with this scale or with this altitude.
These are like architectural questions. I mean, this is how you start to combine both.
Or how we expect a city to grow according to its historical growing rate or growing shape, what will happen after 2000. So, as the lead said, this GIS system can support us with our decision making according to many questions that we can ask ourselves. Only 3 of them are represented here in this slide, but there are, of course, many. Okay. So when we thought of this workshop and when we started to analyze mass housing with GIS, the main goal was to identify and give name to different typologies of Europe's mass housing. We want to better understand the qualities of the different urban tissues in mass housing. And we want to understand it from a parametric point of view and also from an architecture and design point of view. Our research started with the question: can we define middle-class mass housing with special mathematical parameters? And I think this is a good pointing start for our discussion. Can we actually define the middle-class mass housing not with our eyes? Yes, I think each and every one of us, when we see a mass housing neighborhood, we can say, okay, this is a mass housing neighborhood, and it's different from other neighborhood. But can we give the mass housing the parameters? First of all, it's quite an easy task. Not so easy, but quite easy, because the mass housing, when we see it, we know. I think when you see those pictures of neighborhoods from Israel from the 70s or from the 50s, everybody can say, okay, this is a mass housing. Why it's a mass housing? Because the buildings are in a certain shape, they're in a certain position. Yes, they are aligned with the streets, or they are aligned with the parcels. They are very repetitive. And so, with our eyes, we can see that this is a mass housing neighborhood. And we started to analyze the blueprints of those neighborhoods with categories like what is the footprint, what is the height, what is the proportions of those mass housing. We started to create categories like this is a small one, this is a very big one with an H shape, this is a rectangle, this is a very long rectangle, this is with a 4 stories high, this is 3 stories high. So we can start to give names to those buildings, we started to see that there are two major orientations, parallel to the street or orthogonal to the street. And we can see that the formative design that again and again, the distance between the buildings, we can start to create parameters for those buildings. And here is one of the tables that we created with parameters of the building footprints, the type 1A, type 1B, type 1C, with the different parameters. This is the footprint, this is the height, floor numbers, distance between the buildings, the orientation. Okay, so we started to realize that we can define different houses or different tissues, urban tissues, with these parameters.
From the same group that are mass housing in Israel. I mean, for what we know.
And we use with the analysis of spatial analysis. This is a different kinds of spatial analysis. Here it's for dots, but you can see that we can separate a lot of dots, a lot of knowledge to different kinds of groups, and we have many methods to do that in GIS and Python. And we also use not only for dots, but for the polygons of the houses. So if we have a similar groups of building with a similar footprint, with a similar height, with a similar floor number, with a similar distance between the buildings, we can create a GIS analysis that calculates the parameters. So what we did, we created a certain envelope around the building, okay, and with this envelope we can start to create the dimensions. If there is This is the air conditioner?
This is the condition.
No, I want the air conditioner.
Ah, okay.
So how can I maybe I'll demonstrate it on here. If we have a certain building, like this is a building, or sometimes it looks like some kind of an H-shaped building. Sometimes it looks like this. So if we create an envelope around, okay, so here will be, the envelope will look like this. Here also will look like this. And the building will be okay, and here. So in this case, the building will probably contain 90% or 95% of the envelope. Here it will be 85, 95, 4%. Here it will be 50, 70% of the envelope. We can measure the length, we can measure the height, we can measure a lot of parameters. By doing so, we can start to divide buildings to groups, to similar groups of buildings. Okay, like we did here in the Shiva. You can see here groups of buildings which are similar, with the in the parametrical parameters, in the parametrical way, and we can group them with the GIS, with this analysis. Okay.
You can go ahead
Ask.
and ask,
No?
discuss.
Yes, you want to know?
No, just you saw the parameters which are here. Immediately we just visualize our case numbers and said, okay, we'll probably
Yeah,
do
this
this
is
thing.
what we would say.
Yeah, this is
Perfect.
right.
Yeah.
Because she's working with parametric design, that's why I asked. Are we doing similar things or?
Yes.
When you see our presentation, you actually see how we are analyzing it and then you will connect it. But I think what's important here in this presentation is the way of thinking GIS analysis, which this is one option for analysis that you will see from the beginning till the end. And then we'll show you some more, but it's more like to open the mind for the GIS. It's not about learning GIS, it's about what to do with the GIS, which we think is much more important.
So this is an example of one city in Israel called Shiva. It's in the south, and here we can see several places. This is very near here. It is the university, so we like this neighborhood a lot. But we can see here that there are buildings, yes, with the same shape. They are the green ones. They are very similar to one another. Here, I don't know this color, fuchsia.
Magenta.
Magenta. They are very similar. Okay, so we can now know that our analysis can recognize buildings that are similar to each other, that have the same parameters, and we can start giving them names. Okay, the long ones, the red ones, they are rectangle. Okay, the blue ones, H shape. We can see it, but now also the computer, the GIS can see it, can understand it. Okay, the green ones are the irregular, the ones that looks like an L shape or something like that. Okay, so now the computer can recognize the buildings with those parameters. Okay, so after we understood that, we want we ask another question. Can we define clusters? We are interested in the buildings, but we are more interested in the clusters of buildings. We want to define the clusters, the places where the buildings are creating some kind of cluster, and the clusters, they are not only buildings. The clusters are some kinds of typology. Okay, and we want to understand if we can start talking from the aspect of typology that we can define to terminology. Can we say that this mass housing neighborhood, we can call it something, and this other mass housing neighborhood, we can call it something different. Okay, so we're interested in the process of defining typologies and creative terminology of mass housing. So here's a case study of the city of Haifa, when we can see that there are clusters. Yeah, for instance, here this is a cluster. Here this is a cluster. The clusters are marked with the boundaries of green, and we can we want to understand if there are differences. For instance, here in this cluster, yeah, we can see that there are, no, I'll begin here. In this cluster, okay, this one, we can see that all the buildings are the same. They are all standing with the narrow side to the street. Yeah, this is the street here. You can see, and they are very similar. Okay, this is maybe we can call it. Maybe we can understand this line of pattern or this pattern of buildings as a classic neighborhood or mass housing neighborhood. Here there are L-shaped buildings, the blue ones, and between them there is a small unit or small house of a rectangle. So this neighborhood combined two different kinds of buildings, the L shape and the rectangle. Maybe we can call this neighborhood with a different name that we call this neighborhood, the classic neighborhood, okay? And when we started to look at the case studies in the atlas, we started to realize that there are many different patterns of mass housing. For instance, here in Budapest and in Sarajevo, we see very similar buildings in a very similar shape, yeah, here and here, that they are very similar to each other and they are repetitive. Maybe we can call it repetitive classic or classic repetitive mass housing, also in Budapest, okay? Here, we can see something else. We can see that the buildings are in a different pattern, and they're combining several types of building in the same surrounding. But what we can see here, there are a lot of cul-de-sac in the neighborhood. Here there's a cul-de-sac, here there's a cul-de-sac, here there's a cul-de-sac, a lot of cul-de-sac. Also here, the streets are ends, and they are not connected to a grid. Okay, so maybe it's a different pattern of mass housing, because here the grid is very connected. Here not, it's not connected. So there is a difference.
I would like to say something about the Hebrew. We left the Hebrew pronouns, which you can't read, but sometimes the meaning in Hebrew has a meaning in the official meaning, things like that. So we left it and we translated it, but maybe in different countries, the meaning is different. You know, you understand what I mean? I mean, maybe you define it differently.
The terminology can be connected to the culture. Yeah,
this is where we would like to connect the typology with the terminology of, let's say, EU or something like that, or so we can see if it really works together or not.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of Hebrew.
Yeah.
It's a recent maps that you work with.
Hmm?
In Tirana, there are very recent maps. Recent, lately.
This is from Google.
But the practice is, I mean,
Yes.
because when they originally were designed, they were not with the sacks, so we use in the formal construction. They go off the ground like
That's
this.
very nice.
That's very interesting.
That's very interesting. So that there is a dynamics.
And it's changing every day. It's quite like this.
So this is also something that we would like to know, because like in Israel, we began this research, which actually we have a paper about it, because Israel is going through a huge urban renewal process. Like they want to change all the buildings that were developed during the 50s, 60s. They don't know how many buildings we have. Some of them starting to collapse because of maintenance. So there is something needs to be done, but how? And we figured out that there are a lot of typologies that are need to be reserved. And because of the quality, we'll talk about quality in a minute. But which one? Not all the typologies we need to preserve. Or how do we renew? How can we decide what to do? How do we figure out what is a compound? Where are the blue lines goes? So these are part of the questions we asked ourselves. And what you're talking about, Albania, which is very interesting because we looked at it from our point of view and not from your point of view, which is very, very interesting. And I'm sure there are parallel point of views in different areas in Europe. Or, and this issue, we would like to, through the atlas, we would like to see this issue. Also, we'll see it in the course presentation how we continue this.
So there are different patterns, like here it's a different thing that we call the complex repetitive pattern. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I think you got the idea. And all of those maps are from the database, from the case study database of our cost action.
Now, the case studies are from the database, the maps are from Google Maps.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
now, following.
So, when we talk about typology or terminology, we can start dealing with the differences between classic and complex. Yeah. Between the buildings that are following the street, that follow the street line, or they are a line, or they are not in parallel, but diagonal to the street, or repetitive building, or separated patterns, or whatever we will think of together.
I think there is a good source to define housing typologies. Do you know that? There is, I have the PDF, but it's a book from Dutch University who defines, it's a Dutch professor. I'll find it and tell them.
Okay.
Okay, after we can share the bibliography among all the.
Yeah.
So we can develop your skills.
Okay. We asked another question, a third question, that we don't have actually the answer yet, but we want to approach it. So how can we use the parameter for addressing local issues? For instance, increasing urban renewal process. That I think in the lecture in the morning, I think many of you mentioned urban renewal as something that you want to address, and we want to address it as well. We want to understand if we're doing this renewal process, if we're increasing or decreasing the quality of the environment for the people that live in those areas. We can't actually now. We're not able yet to connect the parameters to the quality, but we can start to define quality. And I think also in the morning lecture at Athena talked about quality parameters, walkability, and open spaces and stuff like that. And we want also to be able to measure it. So, as the lead said, it's an issue in Israel. It's a very big issue. Here in this picture, the building just collapsed because it was too old. And here they demolished.
Very close to Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
In the neighborhood.
Last year, it's not something
Yeah.
from the 50s. It collapsed, and here they demolished a building which was too risky to live in. And in the upper picture, you can see buildings which were too weak to stand. And what they did, people live here, during a process of strengthening the building. And in Israel, it's an economical process. It's not something that the government give money to do that. So what the people in the building did, they sold, or they gave the roof to a constructor or to some kind of developer who strengthened the whole building. You see here the new construction. And he builds two or three floors on the top of the building. It creates new housing units. You sell them, and with that profit, you can create the development and the strength of this building. So in Israel now, we're dealing with the option, many options to demolish the building, to strengthen it with this kind of methodology. What to do, and what will create a better environment for the people.
I mean, it's all under one national plan. I mean, we have a national plan which calls TAMA 38, and we have a lot of sub plans under it, but it's something very official.
So we demonstrated on a small neighborhood in a small town in the north part of Israel called Thessaloniki. This neighborhood is in the shape of a boot, so we call it the boot neighborhood. It's not the real name, it's something that we gave. And we
No, it's a real name.
It's the real name?
Yes.
The boot. Okay. And you can see here the parks, the private areas, the green areas, the public building, the existing residential, okay? And we created a scenarios, actually 3 scenarios of renew this neighborhood, 3 alternatives. We'll start from this one. This is an alternative that we add 2 or 3 floors to each of the buildings, the existing buildings, creating a renewed neighborhood with these laws of the national plan, TAMA 38. And in these 2 alternatives, we demolish, or we didn't demolish the building, but we created a scenario that demolished the buildings and built a different pattern. This pattern, the upper pattern, we call it the social pattern because the buildings are connected with some kind of small, communities. And this one, we call it the economical alternative because we thought that it will be very good for the free market to create those kind of buildings with a private green space or open space in the middle, and very easier to build apartments or houses or residential area in the middle.
But we didn't change the road layout.
We didn't change the road. In each of the alternatives, there is the same amount of units, of housing units. So the parameters are quite similar in the amount of people that we're going to live there, the amount of housing, and the amount of residential units. So it's similar, but we wanted to understand the different influences of these three scenarios on the environment. So we measure it in here the existing situation, alternative 1, alternative 2, alternative 3. We, as you can see, we measure the project area, it's the same. The building plot area, building footprint, roof area, potential for PV, green areas, private green, semi-private, public, public roads, parking, open area for rain and water to get into the ground, power demand. We did it with a group from researchers from Austria, which are part of the cost. And as you can see, there are differences in the results from the different alternatives. Not very big differences, but there are differences in the potential of the PV, in the public road, public space, and so on. We also analyze different parameters that we call them the quality parameters, like the quality of public transport or the parking, respect with the traffic laws, parking laws. So the amount of green in the built area, the amount of green roofs, the amount of PV potential, the amount of energy, the amount of shade area. In Israel, it's very hot in the summer, so it's very important for people to have shade. So, what's the difference between the shade in the different scenarios? Here, in the existing situation, you can see there is not a lot of shade. In this second alternative, there's a lot more than in the third alternative, but similar to the first alternative. So we have a lot of parameters that we can analyze. Walking paths, the amount of walking paths, walkability score, security, visibility, as you saw before, eyes on the streets, eyes on the park, what you can see from the building.
Walking area with shade. I mean, it's good that you have shade, but you need to walk towards the shade. I mean, it's not in the walking area.
Yeah.
You didn't do
it. And we started to create maps of the different
using the GIS.
With the GIS, of course. For instance, here you can see the shadow, the shade areas. Maybe you can. It's a bit difficult, but there are. You can see it better. There are areas that are shaded. You can analyze the shade in 2 or 3 days during the summer and to understand where the areas that are shaded in the midday in the different alternatives. Here you can see the visibility. There are differences in the visibility between the alternatives. Here there's a strong areas of visibility, but here it's a weak visibility in this area. But here in this alternative, the visibility is very strong in those community developed community patterns of housing. Here in the existing situation, that the visibility is very good. The architects that developed this neighborhood many years ago created a very nice visibility pattern of the building. So maybe it's something that we need to preserve.
So this is like mass housing that we extruded them following the Tama 838 that we have in Israel, and we discovered several issues of quality that we analyzed that they are better than the existing or what the alternative we decided to do. So this is how we discovered that there are patterns that are good to preserve.
But it just, sorry, to understand, the first example that we are seeing is
It's existing.
situation, and the last one is what you improve only
Yes,
the existing one.
it's like we call it in Israel business as usual. That you take the building, extrude it, and that's
see what
it.
happens.
And you don't think about changing the area, which what's actually Tama 38 is doing for most of the buildings. For better or for worse, they don't care. Just the economic, just about the economic issue, more apartments. So
But the kind of doing an extra
Yes.
comments.
this is exactly, but it's extrude and volume.
And here's an analysis of the sense of security. Dalit will talk about it tomorrow. And you can see that there are lines of people feel very secure in this alternative. Here, it's
And also
very,
you see in the extrude version.
here there is a less security in this area. Here, a little bit there. But the security in the existing situation in the alternative 3, which is better. So we need to to learn from the.
Maybe you're going to explain in more detail tomorrow, but I just wonder what tool did you use to measure the security? The viewing or some
I developed this tool and I'll talk about it now. Sorry.
So this is some you can see what I'm trying to say in this picture, in this slide, that you can actually create performance indicators and measure different design alternatives for urban renewal in order to understand or in order to improve the quality of the environment. And so we have 3, I'm saying more, but we have 3 questions for this workshop. First of all, we want to identify more parametrics to define building patterns. We develop the parameters in Israel according to the Israeli patterns. Maybe we can open it to discussion and create or define more parameters that we can measure buildings according to. We want to create a better global, regional, European terminology of mass housing, different shapes, different patterns, and we want to create novel links and new connections between the parameters and the performance. The performance of the neighborhood, like I showed you in the last couple of slides, that we can see that the different parameters, the different patterns are improving or disimproving the performance of the environment, the performance of the neighborhood, and we want to start to look on those neighborhoods and on those designs in a more performance way of thinking. I think that will be it. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Open for discussion.
Yes.
I have another question concerning the time parameter. Let's say that a neighborhood or a city evolves, and how does it function? 1 year, you have a situation after 5 years. Parameter. I think it's quite easy to use this for a building or for a block or for. But how does it doesn't charge a lot the system, the model, or it's just possible?
I'm not sure if I understood the question.
If
There
I want
is
to
a
see
dynamic-
how a city is evolving, the city is
Oh.
evolving.
Yeah.
Can we have a time button that we
For
can?
instance, how was from the 60s until now was the main development of
Yes.
the city?
And to fill in the graphic way, this evolution.
Like a timeline,
Yeah.
yeah.
That one, for example, in New York,
No, but I think he's talking about what we have. Nothing changed from this mass housing in Israel. I mean, you see the patterns, you see the neighborhoods. You forward 50 years,
same.
the same.
Yeah.
There, but what we saw different, it's about the outside, which or started to analyze it too. Because we saw that the patterns of mass housing, let's say in the periphery area, it began to become worse. Yeah, but if you go to Tel Aviv, central areas in Israel with people with more money, the maintenance of the buildings and the outside of the buildings are much better. Now you start to see also plans for developing a better landscape for these areas in several areas in the periphery. But actually these buildings or what happens with them didn't change at all until the new plan of Tama 38 that began in 2005.
Just in the central part.
And mostly in the central areas, and really started to work only about 10, 15 years afterwards. So it's for the last 10 years. So not much change in these areas.
But yes, you can develop your maps
With the timeline.
With the timeline.
The
And you can,
dimension.
Yes.
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 So you
Yes.
would, it's my work. You can
No, no,
correct me.
no.
But what we have in Google Earth, you know, that you have the timeline that you can put the satellite. 20 depends of the local. Years ago, you can do it with parameters in the maps, and after export the maps. That is another important thing. And I can advance you also that it's possible, because I asked you a few minutes ago, it's possible as a common user. You don't have to have the GIS software to see the maps that you produce, but you have to publish, of course. So you have different ways of publishing. You have the private one, just for you, your research center, or the GIS community. It's a kind of maps or examples that Ivan showed. You can go see and you can use that maps, and after you can export for the common user.
But if I add here, and I'll continue thinking about your question, I think it differs which parameters you're looking for when you want to see the timeline. I mean, there are many parameters. We discovered several of them. We think there are more. And actually, we saw it now, or I'll show you also the analysis. But if you're looking about time differences, maybe there are only certain parameters that you need to look on, but not all of them. So sometimes analysis discover which parameters you need to look at. And if I forward to the security, the sense of security analysis I did, I discovered there are many parameters that you can measure by them security, sense of security, but I used only 5.
For example,
So-
cameras, there are 15, 20 years ago, maybe, that increases the security.
I didn't, I was looking only about morphology, not about cameras, only physical and only with a sense of mind of planning. how can you plan for to be a better place that you won't need the cameras, which is, you know, it's a different way of thinking. But I think if you start to analyze the parameters, you discover that you only need to look about 2, 3, 5 parameters along the years to understand the physical issue along the years or whatever issue. But it's very interesting.
For instance, I'm just trying to cross with the data that we have inserted in the templates. And one of the questions that was very discussed since the beginning was regarding the location of the neighborhood during the time. That means the neighborhood was built in the 50s, for an example, of course, and it was in the city center. No, it was in the periphery. Okay, it was planned to be in the periphery, and nowadays it's already belongs to the city center because the city expand. This could be a parameter to analyze.
Yes, yes, of course.
Okay, just to try to understand how it
How
change.
the geographical position of the neighborhood changed
Yes.
because of the growth of the city.
Yes.
Okay, because this is very important, because one of the most critical, one of them was that the template can express how it changed during the time. Okay, it's a physical sheet, and for that we have what happened in the current time or in the planned time. It was the way that we found, but like this, it's much easier.
Yes.
You can do it. You can see what you are saying. Okay.
Apart from aerial maps, what other tools can be used to document this transformation?
Beside aerial maps,
I mean, before putting the data into GIS, we need to document or to identify the transformation. For example, we mentioned from this period to that period.
yes. We need to think together. What, these are the groups for. It's not, we don't have the answers for everything. We have part of the answers. But what we would like to do in this workshop is to continue this kind of
I think the
discussion.
question was more for Ines because
Yeah.
since she opened this chapter of template, etc. And what we do is we look at Google Maps, what kind of tool it could be beyond these aerial maps that can identify, because there are aerial images, periodical aerial images you can find for sure. In this year, in this year, in this year, and then you can see, okay, this is the transformation. There are maybe studies which might have been done before, which use from different institutes or I don't know, which do have tools. Now there are drones, other things that can provide, or maybe before they used helicopters or I don't know what they used to take these aerial images. But no, I'm just maybe thinking globally myself.
So then other thing, just to close this or not. For instance, if we have the boundary of our neighborhoods, and we have a satellite image from the 60s and one from 2022, and we saw the difference. But it's important to overlap a map of the limits, the boundary of the city, because that boundary changed over the time. So that is that is possible. We can put another layer on this, and we have already that analysis. So the user can see now in the 50s the city was like this, and the neighbor was in the middle or in the corner, and after the boundary, the city had involved this. So it could be a way to understand
It's a
this.
little bit dangerous.
Okay.
All of the discussion here is regarding the dynamics, which is extremely, my PhD was about the dynamics. So it's something that is It's very interesting, but very hard to put your hands on the historical areas of cities. And so if you try to think of how it was in the 60s, then you bound yourself to historical data that it's not very easy to put your hands on. But if you analyze the real data, real world now, present data, and you need to ask, I think, what you can get from the data that you have. Not, we are researchers. We always want to have the data that we don't have.
Or to discover what other parameters we can add from what we already have. Now we can define additional parameters of different questions.
For instance, if a neighborhood is dynamic and the buildings are changing, it's reasonable that some of the buildings got changed and some of the buildings were not. So you can see from a present map all the phases that the neighborhood came across in the last 30, 40 years. You can see the old building, the one that stayed as it was built in the past. And you can see the new one, and you can see the differences between them. And maybe there is another building that was, I don't know, redeveloped 20 years ago. So you can see the line of the development of options in the present data.
So, just a parenthesis, crossing with the cost action, because as Eden said, we are talking also about terminology. That is the main output of the working group too. So how we can cross this that I can never explain working. So we can after this with our terminology pass it to the working group too. As well, the interventions that you are talking about, just saying. So it's very it's essential. I could say regarding the intervention stock. So what we have happened nowadays in our cities about the interventions in the modern neighborhoods, for instance. So how we can measure it from through the teams.
I think it would be very interesting, session for one of the groups here in this working session, this workshop, to create is to look at the data, the atlas that Ines showed us earlier, and try to group the, I don't know, 100 cases based on so it's a lot. If we can divide them to groups, to name those groups, I think it would be a huge step forward in our understanding of the parameters and the terminology.
I would like to follow the topic that you raised, work between the different working groups, because I'm actually a member of working group too, which is responsible for the technology. And we face almost the same boundaries that you face, because the topic is very broad. Our territorial coverage is very broad. Well, Europe is not quite big, but it's very diverse. So it's very difficult to cover all the areas and all the countries with all their terminology. And so what comes to my mind here is that some cooperation between the groups would help. Because what we did until now is that everyone set to the table is a number of terms from the area of mass housing. But maybe if you set some terms that you find common alternatives in our countries. Maybe this would help, and this would also provide a basis for doing mapping. Because I'm sure Romania and Bulgaria have a very common things. We discussed this with Dana, so we have said many things. Of course, this has a historical background and territorial background behind that, but this would help if you say we need this, for example, maybe what you said as criteria or characteristics in the table that you show. Maybe we can try to translate, or just these three typologies that you named, classic long or something like that. And now I will finish, but it comes to my mind. I recently wrote a report, and I was wondering how to go in English. That typical neighborhood when you have the buildings around the neighborhood along the street. So, for Google here, it was a classical neighborhood. I was very surprised that this is just that simple, because the classical neighborhood could be very different in different countries. But maybe there are some generalizations, for example, influenced by Eduardo, or for example, in Barcelona also was there. And they said that this is Barcelona is a typical example of the classical neighborhood. If we search for some common word, maybe we can try in that way. Just name our most popular plans for the neighborhoods and find words in different languages. Another example. I just wanted to explain how do we make a simple residential neighborhood built in the second half of the 20th century, where there are a lot of English translations that we a bit even from our language to English. So this
I think just to support you a bit, I think that is local knowledge. And that is local environment, and you should keep as it is originally, but you can provide English explanation, because that is the real contribution of the thing, not making it Englishify, in my opinion.
Well, the problem is that we should understand each other. And if someone from Spain, for example, calls one thing in one way, and we call the same thing in the other way, this is a problem in international research.
No, that's right. I think there is this book that I mentioned, Housing Design and Manual, which is from Delft University, Bernard Le Pen, Harald Moy. I have the PDF. So this is a very good book which identifies all housing forms, housing typologies, and maybe it can be used as a kind of manual for common ground for each of us.
I already saw that from the Vanya method. But Vineta, for Finnish, in my opinion, we can find English name, and after we have the local names. This just regarding terminology. And what we are doing here is exactly that. So we are trying to work in the small groups and try to find what we are looking for. So, of course, in the end of this workshop, we'll share with the working group the terminology that we achieve. But it will be very interesting. We can do the opposite also. So you can, yes. So you can give us the most important terminologies for you, and you can try to find if it's possible to have a partner to analyze it.
I was just thinking.
No, I will contact her. No, but first I have to understand how it works, because at this point I can't.
It's quite similar. We feel
Yes, I know. I did one also.
Actually, we started this project. There is a book that was developed in 2005. It's been the Israeli project. It was called the Israeli project. it's in Hebrew. But in this book, he took all the buildings in Israel and divided them into typologies. But it was a research, but I wouldn't say, don't want to say academic or not, but he divided them. And what we look in this book is about the mass housing, the building only. So we also if we went Edmund, the book that you're talking about, we need to look into the mass housing building there, not all the buildings. So if because we can't go all over, we will finish not in this timeline, of course. But if we're looking only on the mass housing, this is what we did here, but it was our starting point. And then we continued to develop it, and if the books goes like that, we went like this. Yes, because we divided it into parameters. And when you divided it into parameters, it starts playing a different game. Okay? So this was a knowledge that we took out of it. So we wouldn't like, I'm talking also about the classic work, because we wouldn't like to take this back to the historical patterns and all that. We're not there. We would like to take it into the parameters way of thinking. So you can define the buildings by length or by width, by height. Yes, but with parameters that you can measure. And these parameters can give them terminology, not to divide it into terminology and go into it. It's like a different way for looking at the mass housing building. Additional way, not instead, but additional way in order to take it to additional research like we did with the quality. Because, for instance, my research field is into quality of performance. But, and there's a big but, I would like to understand the typology. Because we realized that it makes a big difference on quality and performance. But this is from the parameter point of view. So I think we need to hear, it's good to work together with working group 2, but not doing the same work they're doing. We take the terminology into different paths.
But
No, of course, but we need to understand the basics.
Yes, that's for sure. So maybe we should continue with your.
Yeah.
If it's okay, we'll have a coffee break at 4 o'clock, more or less. So.
In fact, I just sent that book you mentioned. For sure, we'll rely on what that it is actually composed its standard. But it's a very good book and can use also for teaching that, especially some definitions about housing shape, housing form.
Sorry, but I can't send you the Israeli project book. It's not necessary. First, it's a book.
I benefit myself on this because I have a paper on defining housing typologies, how to define that. I propose some certain your terminology parameters, you can say like that.
I have to work that we have working on this to define the categories of buildings, tower, slab, detached houses, buildings, walls, everything. Yes, we work with this from best because it was in the beginning. I thought it was impossible to achieve, and we can visualize. So it's good for the ones doing the topics of the template and for the ones who have to fill it. Here, this
I sent another one. Because they just forgot. They sent it. The second one, key. Okay.
No, that's clear.
Oh, this one.
The
I
only
sent the
one,
second email.
I think the only architect, it's not in the mailing list, is he, but you are linked with so.
Did you write?
Yes.
I sent the first email, but I forgot the link, and then I sent the second one with the same thing, and I put the link.
Best.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes when, but you know, but you know what the problem of this problem? It's not a problem. It's from an English point of view, and it's like from the Western point of view. Because when I looked at the beginning of this course, I remember there was one for presentations from mass housing from all over, and it was like for me, from Israel, that I know mass housing is four stories levels, and then I saw this mass housing from Eastern Europe, and it was different, and it was like, because every time, you know, I had a teacher that told me that the history is written from the historian point of view. Not from the, so,
The ontology will become.
so it makes a big difference to look at mass housing.
No, this is in general for housing. You're right. We're focused on mass housing.
Yeah.
I said.
No, but it's very good. It's a beginning point.
We are
To
focused
understand.
in mass housing and middle class.
Yes.
Don't forget the middle class, please. Because it changed everything, and you have to limit our actions to this already product. Like for that, I remember that you shared that. All right. Yes. We'll start. Okay. Shut up. No, anyone needs to have a break, you can continue. Okay, this is our a white day, it's the first day, so it's a white day. So tomorrow we have to work, and Friday is the last day, so it will be light still. So, okay.
Okay. I'm Or from Colorado University, as we said before, collaboration with Technion, Dalit and Idan, as a GIS analyst. And regarding the GIS analysis, in referring what Idan just told us about the article Dalit and Idan, analyzing and topologies of mass housing according to several parameters.
So right now we're going to talk about the analysis of those parameters, how we do it in the GIS, what we can do and produce from it, and later on we might dive in right actually how we do it in the tools in the GIS, in the Python analysis. We'll talk about it later. But right now let's introduce to some, first of all, the main aim according to the Thessaloniki article, as we seen in the previous lecture of Ridan, to analyze urban area and see which area inside the urban area is suitable for urban renewal, as it refers to a certain area which built right after the Second World War, which account for social mass housing. According to, and we find this area according to the parameters. Let's move on. Those are all our case studies so far. There are approximately 38 have analyzed so far. And we can see several countries. We can see how does it look like separately. This is an example from Italy, Rome, a case study which called Via del Soteto. Each case study has its name, its area to serve us in later analysis, ratios, etc. Let's go on. You can see the title. If it's important. So let's have an example from one of our case studies. From Portugal, let's zoom in. Lisbon, we have several case studies. Lisbon Alforneiros, Lisbon Oeiras. Let's choose this one, Lisbon Portela, 2685. We have this case study. For example, with my analysis of parameters, I can add information to this case study. For example, how many rectangle typologies a building it has, how many patios in a yard, how many square typologies, how many train-shaped, very long rectangle, the angle of the building, east, west, or north, south. It means like vertical or horizontal in the space. We'll see it right in the next slides.
Oh, I would like to add something here. You see that we started with several parameters, and or as he began to analyze, he continued to add parameters from the analysis.
Yeah, the main aim is to analyze according to the Thessaloniki articles, and the more information we can acquire and search and research here and achieve, for instance, vegetation percent of the urban area according to remote sensing, which we'll see in the next slides, the better. The better information we can acquire during the analysis, they will serve us later in the analysis. So let's see what is exactly the parameters, how it looks like physically. Rectangle typology. We can see a rectangle, patios, square typologies. Those are examples. The train, the very long, which looks different, might have a different significance. Building from east to west, let's put it down, so it's from as a vertical and from north to south. We can see later how we define them as such. And here we can see the table of summation, how much is the percent of the rectangle out of this area. We take, this is a short summary, we take the case studies and we want to say how many of the parameters it has, because later it will be significant for us to classify it as kind of a typology. For example, this area could be suitable for urban renewal. This is the results of the previous slides analysis, which I've done upon all the 38 case studies. We can see the multi-indexing of East Europe, West Europe, the country. Some countries have several case studies. Here we can see we can classify it as according to the case study name. And here we can see that we start to deal with kind of big data, because to reach those results, we have to know how to manage the big data and calculate it right after we achieve it from the QGIS, from the GIS. Let's move on. Those are some graphs we can do. Those are not official results, just for example, what we can achieve from such analysis. As we said about the additional data, additional information we can acquire, we can reach from the procedure of the analysis. Let's talk a little bit about the remote sensing vegetation analysis that we perform on these case studies. We're a bit familiar with remote sensing here. Yeah. So anyway, we're going to have a minute about the remote sensing, the method we've been using to identify, to calculate the vegetation percent out of the case study. So here we see the spectral bands, which are sensors of remote sensing senses from the ground, from the area case study. Later we will see it. I'm right now telling the background for us to understand the short background of the remote sensing, how we calculated the vegetation, how we reached the result, what is it based on. So we here looking on the NDVI, the most common normalized different vegetation index, in order to identify the vegetation health or whether it's vegetation or not. The results of this kind of analysis provide us results ranges from -1 up to 1, and the higher the rate, the healthier the vegetation. From rate 0.2, approximately each researcher will fit it to its research, but these ranges below 0.2, 0.3 is not account for vegetation, and above it will be vegetation. Let's move on.
Or are we define the parameters that about, for instance, 0.2? It's correct, or we can imagine. Are we that we define the parameters?
Yeah, we did the NDVI calculation. We got results, ranges from every NDVI calculation from -1 up to 1. We can decide as the researchers of this, for example, this article, to be that we want to use the 0.3 as a threshold for vegetation, and we will see that 0.33 would be the best, because 0.2 does not provide accurate result. So this is what I said. In general, it's 0.2, but each case study, each sensor changes a bit. But of course, we won't take 0.7 because we don't want to analyze the healthiest vegetation of case study. We just want to know what the cover of the vegetation is. And all the case studies have been analyzed according to 0.33, so it's normalized between all. So there's not to be any deviations between several case studies, as they all have analyzed in the same rates of the NDVI. We have here simple aerial image of the case studies example of the Lisbon. We took a planet sensor, planet satellite it's called, resolution of 3 meters, which accounts for a great resolution in the remote sensing. For example, Sentinel satellite provides a 10 resolution mostly. Here we can reach 3 meters because the better the resolution we have, we can reach each tree or each lot of vegetation. We take the aerial image of the satellite image. We calculate by using the QGIS, we calculate the NDVI, and we get this picture. We can see that there's a correlation between the green here and the white here. We can see it has been done correctly right now, but still we can't use this gray and white for our analysis. So we need to export it to retrieve it right from the satellite. Let's move on. We classify them. Each pixel that after the calculation got results of NDVI below 0.33 would be black. Each one that got above 0.33 for our research would be vegetation and would be white, would get a value of 1. As I said, 0 and 1, it's binary because I'm not dealing here with the differences, healthy situation of the vegetation. I only want to see which vegetation, which not, in order to calculate the rate. And we can see now that we retrieve the vegetation in precise way from this area. Let's move on. We can see here some graphs, all the different case study, which has the most, which has the least. And later we can cross this information with other in order to achieve more informed results and conclusions. As we see here, we can do this kind of comparison, but note those notes. Currently we deal with 38 case studies, which are not equally taken as samples for those kind of statistics. So this is only an example of what we can do if we have all the case studies analyzed. If anybody has a question, I'm all there.
I mean, I worked a bit with GIS in the previous year, and I realized that the map that was provided with these vectors and etc., there were errors. We took the database from the municipality in one city in France now, and there were errors because when I go to the site and I see it's not, there are problems. This resolution of 3 meters, which is provided by the satellite, is quite very, very precise. Is that right?
It's very precise according to the technology we have right now in satellite remote sensing. If we have a private drone for each case study, it would be much more precise. We can reach higher resolution, but I think we can afford it. We can reach it.
No, I don't have it.
Yeah. I checked. I tried. Yeah.
No, I mean, I guess those data that were provided to us, maybe they were outdated, I don't know. But my colleague there that we conducted the short-term research mentioned that he had continuous communication with some guys from the municipality, and he was providing but when I go to the site, because my work was a bit also double check. So I look to the map and I go to the site, I identify there, it was like 500 to 500 meters or a bit more, 700, something like that. I don't remember. We see the more presentation. And I made this cross-checking in the site, and I saw that it doesn't juxtapose, because in the map that I have, a database coming from GIS, from the municipality, it's different. Even from the shape point of view, even the definition of the boundaries of the buildings or other elements. But I guess yours looks like quite close, very close to the precise version.
Yes, you touch here in the most important thing, the data. The analysis will be as great as it will be. But if the data is not accurate, so it won't provide reliable results. So right now we've been based according to the OSM, the OpenStreetMap. We export right from the, let's say, Google Maps. We exported from the Google Map OSM, exported the buildings and parks analysis right after. If we have the GIS data from each researcher of the 100 case studies, it would be better because he will provide us the building he wants us to analyze, because right now we analyze it on the OSM. Maybe the OSM is not accurate for you, maybe the OSM is not the data you want.
I guess probably what you have is much more precise than what I just try to compare with my case, but what you realize with 3 meters is very, very precise.
Yeah, the remote sensing is a great tool that we use to map the vegetation.
But what Or is actually talking about, we didn't have the GIS for all case studies because researchers didn't provide it. So we had to improvise through.
So one of the goals of this workshop that I am realizing now is to define exactly what we want to ask to all researchers. Also according to add. So what is the missing information in each case study? And after you found or I do it or find a volunteer for it, and start the networking with the researchers and get the missing information.
Currently, I couldn't reach any information at all on the case studies, except for the painting of the boundary in the PDF. But we need it as a GIS data, at least the boundary. Because if I have the boundary, we can export from the Google OSM, the buildings, the streets.
Has a raster image, for instance, in AutoCAD, and we can measure the distance and the area and so on. But now we have to fix, besides the boundary, that everybody has to understand, for instance, the distance between buildings, or after, in the end of the workshop, we can.
They have, I think this is our role here to.
We ask, we have to ask. If it's not possible, we have to define what is possible.
Yeah, I think our role is
just
to analyze.
Because we have one case, for example, that's the case of Albania. For example, we have the site plan of that neighborhood when it was designed in urban scale drawings. Okay, we have the aerial image, but in the post-socialist period, there have been a lot of informal additions or a lot of modifications, transformations, and etc. Then tried one way to fix it, just to juxtapose the aerial image and the map with transparency, things that we did in Photoshop as plans, what was that cartoon film? Flintstones, like the guy create the environment taking photo focus with stones, etc. Maybe Photoshop also is a bit like that compared to GIS. So maybe this is one, but for example, one of the challenges that I found, although it looks pretty logical to make this thing very easy, I couldn't do it very easy because the morphology of the buildings is so
the differences
transformed.
of the
I cannot
natures.
fix it. Yes.
This is connect what
Yes. How change over time.
If we want to achieve results of comparisons between East Europe, West Europe, then cities in different countries, I would suggest that we use the data of the buildings from the researchers. But if we want to only check our methods, which is not only this is the method that we're going to be used, this data is good for us for the analysis because it's still layers of GIS we can analyze. But as I said, the more data we have from the researchers, the better. Let's move on. There's some correlation between the vegetation percent and the case study area, just for us to see that the vegetation percent calculation was created properly. And we won't dive into the statistic because it's not an official result. Just for us to know that the calculation is done properly. I think we reached the summary. So we have all our case studies that have been analyzed so far. The main aim was to identify the urban renewal suitable areas according to the parameters of rectangle, square, patio, age, irregular, as Idan told us in the previous lecture, and analyze the geographical and physical data with the GIS, and afterwards do the statistics with each one will do it with his own abilities. I mean, Excel, Python, every programming you have, or Excel, but Python, we use the Python to provide a great procedure and results. And additional informative attributes that we want to add, because later we can use it. For instance, parks, as Dalit suggested.
But we analyze the public, the private open space, or public and private open space, like we analyzed the buildings. And then you also can divide them into parameters and see how you can see the same patterns of green area, open area, whatever, in different typologies. So,
you want me to show the slide of the GIS and QGIS downloading?
Yes, can I ask if everyone has already the QGIS downloaded? Okay.
It's free, I think.
Yes, it's free.
It is
You have to download it and follow.
This is free. We have here the slides, how to download it, and we have here the guide, how to really install it in the computer. And everyone can, of course, approach me. I'll help him. And that's it. This is the next presentation of the GIS method, how we did everything that I presented above.
you want to say, or?
So,
I think there's a.
how long is it?
This is the long one.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know what to do. I think, in my opinion, maybe it's better starting.
Yes.
Yes. I don't know what to do.
I think it would be
But
better.
for me, it's okay. We can keep
Because
on.
according to the line of work,
The line of work.
we now-
We already,
We have already
Change
changed
it.
it. We have already changed it. It's dynamic.
Very good.
Very well. So maybe this one that we are talking about should be in the afternoon, and we change it for the conference of tomorrow. I know it was in the afternoon also. No, not tomorrow. Not tomorrow. No, not tomorrow. Today. So we have the coffee break now.
Mhm.
We have more than 10 minutes, so we can just go. We have the coffee break, and after we have the discussion in small groups.
Yes.
So
But maybe we can start with a bigger group and then.
yes,
do
yes.
small. I'm just thinking about.
I want to add a suggestion. Maybe in the coffee break, we can start to think of the groups that we want to create for the workshop. For instance, if there are people that want to work about terminology or typology or parameters, or to learn how to do the GIS analysis with O. And after the coffee break, we can discuss which groups we want to create for the next 2.5 days, right?
Okay. It's a very good idea. And can you advance us which are our hypotheses? So
I think
we
we
have
first
already.
need to discuss in a
I
big
think
room.
we need the coffee.
Yeah.
Exactly. So use the coffee break to think.
We can do it everything here.
It's not here, but yes, the coffee break is here.
If you want to see the GIS web map,
Yeah, the remote control, the remote sensing data. Can you give him the link to the data section of the free remote?
actually, they are not free. We've been using the user, which is not much. Mine, I'll give you, but not much. Data itself, currently no, but I'll try to reach it because it's from the site. I'll keep you updated.
My question is, if I want to make a map like Sentinel or NASA, it's free for any reason.
Sentinel is free.
No, Planet satellite image.
Planet, no, Planet you have to.
The cost.
But you can sign up for Planet in the site. We can try it together. If you say you're from a university, it might be
And
free.
then can I download any location?
Yeah, I think yes.
Okay.
No, I don't just advise everybody that we, yes, what we want to take for our research.
Yeah, and they can participate.
And they can participate if they want to. I think we have not me, not one, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 4 or 5 officers online instead of.
If you want to see the map that can be exported from the GIS, This is the web, not the website, like a website. But when you go on the layer, it tells you the information of the area.
And after I saw that in the last meeting, I think we haven't yet. When we talk about that we can add our case studies to the Google Maps, for instance. We can add that. So when you are you go Lisbon hotel, you have we can add our site or I don't know with our case study, with our information.
Yeah, to the Google Earth.
Yes, Google Maps.
Have a connection with the Google
No, it's not necessary. So imagine we have a custom. Okay, we have a sheet from 1 or 3 or whatever with that information about that neighborhood. And we are dealing with the GIS, but the most common of the persons that not use the GIS